Fantuzzi is a Puerto Rican-American musician, mystic, and global performer best known for embodying the spirit of Woodstock 1969 and for his lifelong mission as a 21st-century troubadour. Rising from a rough Harlem childhood to become a world-traveling artist, he blends Afro-Caribbean rhythms, world music, and devotional chants with messages of love, unity, and spiritual awakening. His life, chronicled in Love at First Bite, Adventures of a 21st-Century Troubadour, 2017, spans encounters with cultural icons like Richie Havens, Jimi Hendrix, and the Dalai Lama, as well as pilgrimages across India, Africa, and the Americas. Through his music, writing, and teaching, Fantuzzi advocates joy, compassion, and selfless service as paths to divine realization, calling himself an ambassador of joy and peace who uses art to uplift consciousness worldwide. Cat Dancer is a British-born writer, photographer, and movement artist whose work bridges spirituality, ecology, and creative expression. Best known as the co-author of Love at First Bite, Adventures of a 21st-Century Troubadour, 2017, with Fantuzee, she collaborated on the book's writing, editing, and visual design, helping shape its lyrical, reflective tone. A lifelong traveler and dancer, Cat integrates body awareness, meditation, and storytelling in her workshops and photography, often focusing on human connection, sacred movement, and environmental harmony. Her collaboration with Fantuzee reflects a shared mission to inspire joy, authenticity, and mindful living through art and experience. Love at First Bite, Adventures of a 21st-Century Troubadour 2017, is a vivid, soulful memoir by musician and mystic Fantuzee, co-written with Cat Dancer, chronicling his extraordinary life as a global performer, seeker, and messenger of love. Blending autobiography, travelogue, poetry, and spiritual reflection, the book traces his journey from a rough upbringing in Harlem through the transformative 1960s counterculture, culminating in Woodstock, and into decades of nomadic adventure across India, Africa, Europe, and the Americas. Along the way, Fantuzzi recounts encounters with musical and spiritual icons, near-death experiences, love affairs, and revelations born of faith, music, and travel. Rich in rhythm and mysticism, the book celebrates joy, devotion, and service as sacred acts, portraying a life lived in harmony with spirit and guided by music as a universal language of unity and awakening. In 1969, Woodstock became the seed of what would later blossom into the Rainbow family. For Fantuzzi, it was not just a music festival but a spiritual initiation, a living vision of peace, community, and ecstatic togetherness that revealed how humanity could exist without hierarchy or violence. Surrounded by hundreds of thousands sharing food, song, and prayer under open skies, he witnessed the first spontaneous manifestation of what he would come to call the global tribe. The fields of Woodstock were the first sacred circle, and the rhythm of its drums, the shared mud, and the unspoken sense of love among strangers all became the blueprint for the gatherings that would follow in the forests and mountains of the world. When Fantuzzi later helped give life to the Rainbow movement, he carried with him the spirit born there, the music, the service, and the belief that through joy and communion, humanity could rediscover its oneness. Woodstock was not the beginning of a career, it was the awakening of a calling. In 1971, Fantuzzi's path widened from the dream of Woodstock into a living movement that was beginning to circle the globe. That year marked the flowering of the same communal spirit that had ignited in '69, now taking form in Glastonbury, the first gathering on English soil to echo the sacred festival energy of Woodstock. Here, Fantuzzi's music and presence helped weave together musicians, mystics, and wanderers into what would soon be known as the Rainbow Gypsies, a traveling tribe of artists whose songs and ceremonies carried the message of unity and transformation. From Glastonbury, the caravan moved through Amsterdam, where the spirit of freedom and experimentation met the European counterculture, then onward to India, where the journey became pilgrimage. This was the rainbow spirit leaving its western cradle and entering the wide world, discovering that the sacred circle of music and service could appear anywhere hearts were open. Fantuzzi's Blowouts, a series of wild, love-soaked celebrations he led during this time, embodied the same principle that would define the rainbow gatherings: spontaneous community, healing through rhythm, and joy as a form of prayer. In these wanderings, Fantuzzi and his companions were no longer attending festivals, they were becoming the festival, a living rainbow, moving from place to place, bridging east and west, carrying the seed of one family under one sky. In 1972, Fantuzzi hitchhiked to the very first rainbow gathering in the Rocky Mountains near Boulder, Colorado, drawn by word of a gathering of the tribes he'd heard about in Woodstock. The invitation spread almost mythically, hand-lettered on jackets, pinned in health food stores, and shared by word of mouth. He caught a single ride in a station wagon with a Great Dane and an Einstein-looking elder and arrived to find roughly 40,000 people converging to pray, share skills, and live communally in the Cathedral of Nature. The moment he entered the circle, he felt himself lifted into an immense, sustained bliss. Despite the alpine chill, he felt no cold, sometimes naked under the open sky, as if held by the Divine Mother. Sufi dancers spun in the sun, chants braided through the crystal air, and the atmosphere itself provided a natural high that surpassed any psychedelic he'd known. The family was being born in real time, and he experienced it as unconditional love, a direct darshan of the mother in clouds and even in a single blade of grass. At one point he was asked to lead a song. He offered a simple ma, ma, an invocation to the mother that matched the tenderness and awe charging the meadow. It landed like a prayer that everyone already knew. By the end, as people began to drift down the mountain, someone hoisted a handmade sign, "See you next year." In that gesture the annual rainbow ritual was born, the seed of a tradition that would echo across decades and continents. In 1973 the Butterfly family emerged as Fantuzee's next evolution after the Rainbow Gypsies, a new traveling troupe where he again served as the primary musical force. He describes a handoff from one roaming, ritual performance family to another, with himself continuing as musical director and principal musician. The Butterfly family kept the rainbow DNA intact: street theater, dance, music, and communal living, and shaped it into a dedicated company that carried Rainbow's participatory ethos from forests and free circles onto stages and into town squares. You can feel the through line in the excerpts: the big DIY blowouts, the Rainbow Gypsy caravans, and then the Butterfly family stepping in with Fantuzzi at the helm, translating the gathering's ecstatic, service-oriented vibe into a repeatable touring format. The scope was immediately international. The book's tour notes list the Butterfly Family World Tour across South America, the USA, Indonesia, Australia, and more, evidence that the rainbow current had become a rolling wave touching continents rather than just an annual circle in the woods. In short, 1973's Butterfly family is the rainbow spirit going pro without losing its soul, Fantuzzi and crew turning the spontaneous magic of the gatherings into a conscious touring family, carrying the same medicine, music, dance, prayer, and playful service across borders and cultures. In 1974 the rainbow current lifted into the Himalayas, where the Kathmandu Rainbow Gathering carried the Forest Circle ethos into a high-altitude pilgrimage of its own. What had begun as an ecstatic counterculture in the West arrived in Nepal as a family of travelers building kitchens, sharing songs, and learning how to live as a village, serving, listening, drumming, and praying under big sky. The scene was playful and devotional at once: impromptu choirs rising from the trees, skits that educated the tribe on how to care for the land, and the daily rhythm of meditation, food circles, and music that turned strangers into kin. From that Himalayan circle the path bent toward India and into an even older river of pilgrimage, the Kumbh Mela. Haridwar in 1974 became the first of 7 Kumbh Melas Fantuzee would attend, initiating a lifelong pattern of returning to the confluence of music and devotion within one of humanity's largest sacred gatherings. If Rainbow taught him how to make a temporary village of love, Kumbh showed him how that village had existed for centuries, millions moving as one body to bathe, sing, and receive darshan, a choreography of spirit on a scale beyond anything the West could stage. The two streams, Rainbow and Kumbh, met in him that year. Kathmandu proved that the Rainbow family could bloom anywhere hearts opened, and Haridwar revealed how ancient India had been keeping the fire for ages. From then on, his journey braided both the free, playful service of Rainbow and the vast, timeless devotion of Kumbh, a single song carried across mountains and rivers. In 1975 Fantuzzi carried the rainbow flame across the Pacific to Australia, extending the global arc of the tribe that had begun in the American forests and Himalayan foothills. The journey marked the rainbow spirit's first real encounter with the Southern Hemisphere, where Fantuzzi's role as troubadour, drummer, and spiritual catalyst began to merge into a larger calling, spreading the culture of open-hearted celebration across continents. Australia in the mid-70s was a landscape ripe for awakening, wild, young, and full of seekers returning from India or fleeing the industrial churn of Europe and the States. Fantuzzi arrived with the music, the stories, and the ceremonies that had already shaped the Rainbow Gypsies and the Butterfly family. He brought the circle format, the drum, the chant, and the invitation for everyone to dance, pray, and play as equals. Out of this energy came the first gatherings of musicians and mystics that would later seed Australia's own rainbow and festival traditions, precursors to events like Woodford and Byron Bay's ecstatic art scene. In those sunburned fields and beachside fire circles, the same principles took root: non-commercial gatherings, shared food, spontaneous music, and a focus on healing through joy. Fantuzee's presence in Australia helped transplant the rainbow ideal, unity through service and art, into new soil, proving that the movement was not confined to any single land. The earth itself seemed to recognize the vibration. The songs and drums of Maui and Colorado now echoed under the Southern Cross. That year crystallized Fantuzee's evolution from a musician within the rainbow family to one of its living emissaries. Australia became both a proving ground and a mirror, a place where the family of light found new language, and where Fantuzee saw that the rainbow was truly planetary, an ever-expanding circle drawn not on maps but in hearts. In 1976, Fantuzee's journey came full circle, from the open fields of communal gatherings to the intimate birth of family. His son, Khalil Jacobs Fantuzee, was born in Santa Barbara, California, grounding his nomadic, world-bridging life in a deeply personal act of creation. The arrival of his first child mirrored the spirit of the rainbow itself, the continuation of a lineage built on love, rhythm, and awakening. Fatherhood softened him, but it also deepened his purpose, to raise not only one child, but a generation connected to music, spirit, and earth. At the same time, his creative energy poured into the release of Open Heart, Warriors of the Rainbow, his first vinyl recording, born in New York. The title alone captured his life's philosophy, that true revolution comes through the heart, and that those who serve the light are warriors not of war but of love. The album wasn't just a collection of songs, it was a sonic prayer, a bridge between the mystical experiences of Woodstock, Glastonbury, and India, and the maturing global rainbow movement. The music carried the same heartbeat that had pulsed in the mountains of Colorado and the jungles of Maui, the sound of community being born through rhythm. In this year, Fantuzee embodied both sides of creation, the father and the troubadour, the nurturer and the messenger. His home life in Santa Barbara reflected the sweetness of stability and intimacy, while the release of Open Heart sent his message back into the wider world. As the Rainbow family expanded its gatherings across continents, Fantuzee's record became a portable campfire, a circle you could hold in your hands. 1976 thus stands as a moment of balance in his story, when the cosmic traveler rooted into human tenderness, when the father of a son and the father of songs became one. In 1977, Fantuzee stepped into the vast, trembling heart of India, the Kumbh Mela at Allahabad, where the sacred rivers Ganga, Yamuna, and the invisible Sarasvati meet. It was there, amid the millions who had come to bathe in light, that the rainbow path he had been walking revealed its ancient twin. The communal spirit he had known in Colorado and Kathmandu was mirrored in this immense, age-old convocation of seekers, a gathering not of counterculture but of eternity itself. One morning, before dawn, Fantuzee plunged naked into the Sangam, the confluence of rivers, feeling their electric shakti surge through his spine like lightning. As he rose from the waters, he looked up and saw before him the radiant presence of Anandamayi Ma, one of the most revered embodiments of the Divine Mother. For a moment outside of time, their eyes met, and her gaze pierced straight through him, planting in his soul a seed that would never stop growing. She turned and walked on into the sea of pilgrims, and he was left trembling in bliss, both laughing and crying, knowing he had been seen, and changed, forever. That vision became a living mantra in his life. From that day on, every song, every gathering, every circle of love was another dip in those same waters. He would later say that this moment was not only the blessing of a lifetime but also a mirror to rainbow itself, the same current of surrender, the same shared devotion, the same collective prayer for unity, only older, vaster, deeper. The Kumbh Mela of 1977 thus became a bridge between worlds, where the new rainbow family of the West met the timeless rainbow of the East. What he had once seen as an experiment in community now appeared as a continuation of an ancient practice, a rhythm as old as humanity itself. The Ganges had called him home, and from that baptism onward, Fantuzee carried her waters in his music, his service, and his smile, a reminder that the rainbow circle had always been turning, long before any of them had found it. In 1978, Fantuzee's life once again merged the sacred and the personal, this time on the island of Maui, where his second son, Eli Jacobs Fantuzee, was born. The moment marked another turning of the rainbow wheel, not in a forest clearing or festival meadow, but in the tender, earthy space of family. Maui itself, with its wild beauty and powerful spiritual pulse, was a natural home for him, a place where community, music, and nature flowed seamlessly together, and where the island's own Ohana spirit reflected the rainbow family's values of love, simplicity, and shared joy. Eli's birth came during a period when Fantuzzi and his partner Lila were living in a converted garage by the sea, a humble 21st century manger, as he called it. The scene was poetic, waves rolling in from the Pacific, the valley of Iao behind them, and the smell of salt and hibiscus in the air. When Eli arrived, Fantuzzi was there to catch him, a slippery flash of new life who, before his body was fully born, opened his eyes and winked at his father. That single wink seemed to carry the whole message of his lineage: playfulness, light, and a knowing connection to the mystery that binds all beings. At that time Fantuzzi was performing around the island with local bands, spreading the same high vibration energy he had carried from the rainbow gatherings. Yet the experience of holding his newborn son deepened his music in new ways. The songs became less about transcendence and more about embodiment, the divine living and breathing in human form. After nights of drumming and dancing, he would come home not to the roar of crowds but to the quiet rhythm of a baby's breathing, and in that rhythm he found a new kind of devotion. Eli's birth represented more than the continuation of a family line. It was the next verse in Fantuzzi's lifelong song of love and service. As the rainbow family's circles expanded around the world, he was learning to nurture smaller, more intimate circles, those of kinship, responsibility, and tenderness. Maui, with its fusion of oceanic vastness and island intimacy, held both truths at once. And so 1978 stands as a year when Fantuzzi's journey turned inward and outward simultaneously, the troubadour becoming a father once more, grounding the cosmic dance of rainbow in the simple miracle of holding his child beneath the Hawaiian moon. On July 4, 1981, high in the mountains of Washington state, the rainbow family gathered once again, this time for what Fantuzzi would later call the most beautiful circle. It was the 10th anniversary of the first gathering, and by now the annual pilgrimage had become a living ritual, a migration of souls who believed that peace was not a dream but a practice. For Fantuzzi, this gathering was a culmination of everything the rainbow movement had been striving for since Woodstock, a full embodiment of community prayer, where silence itself became the music. That morning, as the sun began to rise, tens of thousands of people formed a single vast circle in a natural meadow. From sunrise until noon, no one spoke a word. There were no drums, no chants, no speeches, only the wind, the birds, and the breath of humanity sitting together in stillness. The silence was not empty. It was charged, humming with intention. Fantuzzi later described feeling as if the earth itself were meditating through them, each person a heartbeat in the body of the world. When the noon hour struck, a conch shell sounded, and the silence broke into a thunderous wave of song, laughter, tears, and collective release. Fantuzzi played a central role that day, not as a performer, but as a keeper of vibration. He moved through the circle like a thread of light, helping to sustain the sacred energy of that silence. In the moment of eruption, when the songs and drums finally rose, he joined the musicians in what became a spontaneous symphony of unity, voices from every part of the country, languages blending, hearts synchronizing. It was not a concert, it was communion. The 1981 National Gathering became a sacred milestone in rainbow history, a template for what a true world peace prayer could look like. No stage, no leader, no ideology, just people remembering together how to be one. Fantuzzi would later describe it as the purest moment he had ever experienced, a circle so whole that it felt eternal, as if the original Woodstock dream had finally found its home. The mountain, the silence, and the collective breath that day embodied everything rainbow had ever meant, the living proof that love, when shared in stillness, could become the loudest song on earth. In 1982, the rainbow vision took to the road in a new form, a world peace pilgrimage, a moving prayer that carried the spirit of the gatherings beyond meadows and mountains and into the cities, temples, and hearts of the wider world. For Fantuzzi, this was not merely another tour, it was a sacred mission, the natural evolution of the silence that had filled the Washington Circle the year before. Where the 1981 gathering had anchored peace in one place, the pilgrimage of 1982 sought to carry that peace everywhere, walking it, singing it, living it as a daily devotion. The World Peace Pilgrimage gathered musicians, seekers, yogis, and travelers from across the rainbow family, a caravan of light weaving through countries and cultures with no agenda but love. They walked barefoot into villages, played in marketplaces, visited schools and temples, offering songs instead of sermons, smiles instead of slogans. In each place they stopped, the same intention pulsed, to remind humanity that peace is not a government policy or a political act, but a vibration, a frequency one can live in every step. Fantuzzi was one of its radiant centers, part musician, part mystic, part clown, embodying what he called seva, the joyful service of love. His drum and voice became tools of transmission, turning every campfire into ceremony, every border crossing into initiation. The pilgrimage connected him even more deeply with spiritual lineages he had already encountered in India, the teachings of Meher Baba, Sai Baba, and Ananda Mai Ma, and helped him understand that the Rainbow Family's mission was not new at all, but a continuation of an ancient movement of light-bearers who walked the earth singing peace into being. As the caravan traveled, it touched communities that had never heard of the Rainbow Family yet instantly recognized its essence. In the laughter of children, the prayers of elders, and the rhythms of local musicians, Fantuzzi saw the same flame that burned in every gathering he had known. The World Peace Pilgrimage of 1982 was, in his eyes, the rainbow gone global, the circle unbound by geography, the same heartbeat of unity now echoing through the streets and sacred sites of the world. By the end of the journey, he understood that the pilgrimage was not something one completed but something one became. Peace was not a destination but a way of walking. From then on, wherever Fantuzzi went, whether on stage, in a school, or at a rainbow fire, he carried that same vibration, the pilgrim's promise that every step, when taken in love, is a step toward home. In 1983, Fantuzzi's journey crystallized into sound with the release of his second record, Peace on Earth, recorded in Hawaii. It was more than an album, it was a declaration of everything he had lived, seen, and sung through the rainbow years, a distilled vibration of the gatherings, the pilgrimages, and the love that had been shaping him since Woodstock. The title itself was not metaphorical but literal. Peace on Earth was the goal, the mantra, the prayer made audible. By then, Hawaii had become Fantuzzi's spiritual and creative base, a lush crossroads where he could root his music in the rhythms of ocean, volcano, and rainforest. The islands held the same magic that had defined the Rainbow Family: community, openness, and reverence for the natural world. Every element, from the trade winds to the breaking waves, seemed to carry the song he was trying to write. Surrounded by a circle of musicians and kindred spirits, he crafted an album that sounded like sunlight filtered through palms, an offering of rhythm and joy rather than ideology. Peace on Earth reflected the maturing of Fantuzzi's vision. While his earlier works pulsed with the wild, ecstatic energy of a wandering troubadour, this record carried a new serenity, the peace that comes from knowing one's purpose. The songs were chants as much as compositions, mantras of gratitude, unity, and remembrance, blending reggae, world beat, and devotional music into one seamless vibration. It was rainbow put to melody, multicultural, heart-centered, and timeless. The album's release marked an important turning point, the moment when the rainbow message moved from the campfire to the studio, from the spontaneous to the enduring. Through this record, Fantuzzi could reach those who had never sat in a circle or walked barefoot through the mud. They, too, could feel the pulse of that family through the music. And for those who had been there, at Colorado, at Glastonbury, at the Washington Peace Circle, the songs were a homecoming, a reminder that their vision was still alive and expanding. In 1983, with Peace on Earth, Fantuzzi became not just a messenger within the Rainbow Family but one of its musical ambassadors to the world. The record was both a continuation and a promise that the melody of peace he'd been singing since Woodstock would never fade, only grow louder and gentler, one heartbeat at a time. Around 1989, the Live at the China Club recording in Los Angeles caught Fantuzzi in full flight, translating the Rainbow Circle's open sky magic into an urban night temple. The China Club was part of his LA circuit, a scene where musicians and seekers collided under stage lights instead of starlight. What he had learned in meadows and mountains, how to turn strangers into family through drum, chant, and invitation, he now poured into a club set that moved like ceremony. The tape rolled, and the room shifted from audience to chorus, from spectators to participants. That recording feels like a bridge between worlds. On one side is the non-commercial, gift economy ethos of Rainbow, on the other, the charged spontaneity of a downtown live room. Fantuzzi threaded them together with call and response, grooves that refuse to stay on the stage, and the kind of presence that dissolves the line between performer and listener. Instead of selling a vibe, he ignited one, letting the same current that had pulsed through Colorado circles and Cum riverbanks surge across a dance floor on Pico and La Cienega. Captured to tape, the night became portable community. Listeners who had never camped in a rainbow kitchen or sat in a July 4th silence could drop the needle and be pulled into that field, voices rising, hands answering drums, a room remembering itself as one body. In that sense, Live at the China Club wasn't just documentation, it was transmission, proof that the rainbow doesn't need trees to grow. Give it rhythm, give it hearts, and even a neon-lit club turned sacred. In 1990, Fantuzee's message of unity found a powerful new form through collaboration with the legendary Jamaican band Third World, resulting in the release of One Earth, One People. This was not merely an album, it was a musical embodiment of the Rainbow Prophecy, a declaration that the divisions between nations, races, and faiths were illusions, and that the planet itself was one living being, pulsing with a single heartbeat. By this time, Fantuzee had already spent nearly 2 decades carrying the rainbow flame across continents, from the mountains of Colorado to the Himalayas, from Maui to the streets of Los Angeles. But One Earth, One People marked the moment when his music transcended the circles and entered the global mainstream. Working with Third World, a group renowned for fusing reggae, soul, and consciousness, allowed him to amplify the rainbow vibration through the rhythms of Jamaica, a land whose music had always been rooted in resistance, spirit, and love. The collaboration was organic, born of shared vision rather than commercial ambition. In the studio, drums, chants, and harmonies intertwined like branches of the same tree. Reggae's steady heartbeat met Fantuzee's tribal percussion, devotional lyrics, and world music sensibility. The songs celebrated the universal truths that had guided his entire journey, that music is medicine, service is joy, and love is the only real revolution. The record sounded like a global family reunion, Rastafari and Rainbow, Africa and the Americas, Earth and Sky meeting on the same rhythm. When One Earth, One People was released, it resonated deeply with the growing planetary consciousness of the time, environmental movements, peace marches, and gatherings that echoed Rainbow's ideals. The album became both a soundtrack and a prayer for that moment, bridging the worlds of reggae and world fusion just as the Rainbow family had bridged tribes and traditions. For Fantuzee, this collaboration wasn't just about sharing a stage with Third World, it was about affirming that his life's work had never been limited to one culture or scene. It was about carrying the rainbow message into the broader world, in a form that could be danced to, sung to, and lived. One Earth, One People remains one of his most emblematic creations, a sonic circle where everyone belongs, a musical reminder that the distance between us is only as wide as our willingness to listen. In 1991, Fantuzee faced one of the most harrowing and transformative moments of his life, his first rattlesnake bite, an experience that nearly killed him but also initiated him into a deeper understanding of surrender, fear, and faith. It happened in the hills of Topanga Canyon, California, under a brilliant blue sky, the kind of day that invites trust. He noticed what seemed like a shimmer of beauty in the grass, the glint of a living creature's skin, a flash of nature's perfection. Acting from the same open-hearted instinct that had always guided him, he reached out, and in that instant, the serpent struck, sinking its fangs into the base of his thumb and index finger. The venom shot through his body like liquid fire. At first, he tried to laugh it off, to breathe through it, but soon his heart pounded and his skin began to pulse with every beat. He knew he was in mortal danger. With a mix of instinct and movie-learned desperation, he cut into his own flesh and sucked at the wound, not realizing he was drawing the poison closer to his heart. What followed was an explosion of sensation, pain, dizziness, light, and an overwhelming surge of energy that felt both deadly and divine. As his body convulsed, something extraordinary happened. His consciousness began to dissolve. The trail beneath him shifted, becoming the sacred riverbanks of the Ganges, and he found himself among naked sadhus, chanting and celebrating in the holy waters of Mother India. The rattlesnake's venom became a vision, a passage through death into rebirth. It was as if the goddess herself had bitten him awake, burning through his illusions to remind him that life and death are never separate. He survived, though barely. His recovery was long and filled with pain, but the experience left him changed. The snake had become his teacher, not a symbol of evil or fear, but of transformation, shedding, and renewal. From then on, he carried what he called snake medicine, a heightened awareness of life's fragility and power. It was the beginning of a lifelong relationship with the serpent archetype that would return years later, even more dramatically, in his second snakebite in 2009. That first encounter in 1991 marked a new initiation in Fantuzee's journey, one no guru or gathering could have prepared him for. It was rainbow energy distilled into pure survival, the moment when spirit and body met on the knife's edge. The snake, like the rainbow itself, was a teacher of balance, beauty and danger, death and rebirth, all coiling in the same living mystery. In 2003, Fantuzee released Tribal Revival, a record that sounded like the culmination of everything he had lived and learned through decades of music, travel, and spiritual service. The title itself captured the essence of his life's work, a call for humanity to remember its original rhythm, its ancient kinship, and its shared heartbeat with the earth. Tribal Revival wasn't just another album, it was a living ceremony, a musical homecoming that gathered all the threads of rainbow, Kumbh Mela, and world pilgrimage into one unified sound. By this time, Fantuzzi had become a kind of global elder, a bridge between generations of seekers. His voice carried both the wildfire of the 60s and the deep calm of a man who had walked through transformation, healing, and near death. Tribal Revival reflected this maturity. It was infused with the spirit of the gatherings, the drum circles under moonlight, the songs born in sacred meadows, the chants rising with the dawn at rainbow kitchens. But it also carried a refined production, merging world beat, reggae, Afro-Caribbean grooves, and devotional mantras into a seamless sonic prayer. The album celebrated a universal truth, that the tribe is not something we must create, it is something we must remember. In the lyrics and rhythms, Fantuzzi reminded listeners that we are all part of one human family, connected through music, love, and service. It was a revival not of a lost tradition, but of a living essence buried under modern noise. The pulse of the drums echoed like footsteps in sacred soil, the choruses lifted like global chants for peace. Tribal Revival also reflected Fantuzzi's expanding circle of collaboration. The record brought together musicians from different cultures and continents, drummers from Africa, singers from South America, island musicians from the Pacific, all contributing their own spirit to the sound. In that way, the album was itself a rainbow gathering in musical form, a meeting place for the tribes of the world to sing one song together. When it was released, Tribal Revival resonated deeply within the rainbow community and beyond. It was both an offering and a reminder that the revolution of love he had carried from Woodstock to the world was still alive, evolving, and inclusive. Through this record, Fantuzzi didn't just play music, he invited everyone back into the circle. The revival wasn't about nostalgia, it was about now, about waking up to the tribal heart that beats beneath all nations, waiting to dance us home. In 2005, Fantuzzi's journey took a dramatic turn, one of pain, revelation, and renewal, marked by a near-fatal dive into Pyramid Lake and followed soon after by a profoundly healing rainbow gathering in the mountains of West Virginia. The year unfolded like a parable in two acts: first, a confrontation with mortality, then, a rebirth through community and spirit. The story began at Pyramid Lake, Nevada, a place of stark beauty sacred to the Paiute people. Fantuzzi, ever drawn to water as a mirror of the divine, dove headfirst into the lake, and in one instant, everything stopped. He misjudged the depth, struck bottom, and felt a jolt that left his body paralyzed. Floating, unable to move, he hung between life and death, surrounded by silence and sky. In that suspended moment, he understood the fragility of embodiment, how thin the veil is between movement and stillness, breath and eternity. But life wasn't finished with him. Against all odds, he survived, carried back to shore by friends, and began a slow, humbling recovery. The accident stripped him of any illusion of control, yet it also reignited his faith. He would later speak of that moment as another initiation, a baptism in surrender, the same surrender he had glimpsed in India, in the Ganges, in the eyes of the Divine Mother. The body had failed, but the spirit had awakened again, radiant and unbroken. Not long after, that same year, he made his way, still healing, still fragile, to the 2005 Rainbow Gathering in the mountains of West Virginia. There, under vast skies and cathedral forests, the family was gathering once more. The meadow was alive with song, firelight, and laughter, known as Boogie Meadow, where nightly variety shows turned into ecstatic celebrations of unity. When Fantuzzi arrived, word spread like wind through the camp. He's here. The community that had held him for decades now became his medicine. The gathering was described as a cathedral of nature, a sanctuary without walls where thousands prayed, danced, and cooked together in joyful chaos. Amid the songs and laughter, Fantuzzi returned to his element, not as the fiery performer of old, but as a living embodiment of resilience and grace. Variety show number 26 became legendary that year, a night of spontaneous brilliance where musicians, clowns, poets, and mystics offered their gifts, and Fantuzzi, still recovering, took the stage to remind everyone, gently, powerfully, that life itself is a miracle. In that summer circle, he found the balance again between vulnerability and power. The Rainbow family, as always, reflected his truth back to him, that love is strongest when shared in brokenness, that joy is deepest after the fall. The lake had paralyzed him, but the forest restored him. 2005 thus became a year of death and resurrection, the body breaking, the spirit rising, and the family gathering once more to hold the song of life steady. It was a moment of profound symmetry, The troubadour who had lifted thousands through music was now lifted by the same circle he had helped create. From Pyramid Lake's silent depths to the thunderous joy of Boogie Meadow, Fantuzee's story that year was pure rainbow, the dance of suffering and love, always leading back to light. In 2007, Fantuzee released Divine Inspiration, an album that felt less like a collection of songs and more like a transmission, a radiant offering born directly out of prayer, healing, and devotion. The title itself described the process. This was music that didn't come from intention or intellect, but from surrender. After the near-death experience of 2005 and the deep renewal that followed at the Rainbow Gathering, Divine Inspiration emerged as the natural next step, the sound of a man who had gone to the edge, fallen into silence, and returned with a song. The creative process behind the album was, fittingly, spontaneous and mystical. Fantuzzi described how he entered a kind of trance, allowing songs to flow through him one after another, more than 100 pieces of music arriving almost without pause, as if dictated by spirit. Each one carried a vibration of gratitude, healing, and divine play. He wasn't writing the music, he was receiving it. Friends and fellow musicians helped capture the flood of creativity, scribbling down lyrics and melodies as they poured out of him. The result was a record that sounded like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Divine Inspiration merged the rhythmic intensity of his earlier tribal works with a gentler, more spacious devotion. The drums still pulsed like a heartbeat, but the emphasis was on breath, stillness, and surrender. The lyrics were prayers set to melody, songs of forgiveness, joy, and awakening, rooted in the simple realization that love is the only lasting power. Spiritually, the album marked a turning point. Fantuzee was no longer the wild troubadour chasing the next horizon. He had become a vessel, a servant of the music itself. The songs were messages to the Rainbow family and to humanity at large, reminders that the divine doesn't live somewhere distant, but moves through us in every breath, every note, every act of love. When Divine Inspiration was released, it resonated deeply with those who had followed his journey. Listeners could feel that something had changed, that this was not music made to inspire dance alone, but to open the heart. It was both an invocation and an offering, bridging the ecstatic and the contemplative. In many ways, the album completed a cycle that had begun decades earlier. The same fire that had driven Fantuzzi through Woodstock, Glastonbury, and countless rainbow circles now burned with a steadier, inner light. Divine Inspiration stood as testimony to that transformation. The proof that after all the travels, the pilgrimages, the falls and recoveries, the true destination was always the same, to become an instrument of love. In 2009, the serpent returned, and with it, another profound initiation. 18 years after his first encounter with a rattlesnake, Fantuzzi was bitten again, in almost the exact same place, the base of his thumb and index finger. It was as if the cycle had come full circle, a sacred test revisited. But this time, he met it not with panic, but with presence. The experience would once again bring him face to face with death, and, as before, it would leave him with an even deeper reverence for life. The story unfolded on a mountain road, somewhere between the mystical and the mundane. He was out in nature, feeling alive and connected, when suddenly the familiar flash of scales and sound of the rattle announced the encounter. The strike came fast, precise, and merciless. Within moments, the venom was coursing through his veins, searing and electric. Waves of pain surged so violently that he could neither scream nor move. He felt the universe narrowing into flashes of light and color, the same kaleidoscopic threshold he had crossed during his first bite in 1991, but now with greater awareness of what it meant. Drawing on memory and intuition, he cut into the wound once again, this time with calm precision. Using a plastic bottle to create suction, he attempted to draw out the poison, praying with every heartbeat. The pain was unbearable, yet underneath it all pulsed a strange peace. He described drifting in and out of consciousness, feeling himself move in and out of life and light, communing with what he called the great choreography of existence. It was as if his spirit were watching his body from above, understanding at last that nothing, not even death, could sever the connection between him and the divine. As he teetered between worlds, Fantuzzi began to pray, not for rescue, but for surrender. "Guide one and one, great I am that I am," he whispered, blending his voice with the unseen forces surrounding him. The venom became a teacher once more, a living symbol of transformation, reminding him that every act of destruction also carries the seed of renewal. The snake, as always, was both killer and healer. He survived, miraculously. The recovery was slow, marked by waves of pain and exhaustion, but also by profound gratitude. Where the first bite in 1991 had been an awakening, this second one was an anointing, a reaffirmation of purpose. Fantuzee understood that the serpent had not come to punish him but to purify him, to burn away the last remnants of fear and ego. Afterward, his songs grew quieter, his teachings simpler. "Your magnificent choreography is to be danced, not questioned," he would later write, reflecting on that time. The snakebite had become a metaphor for his entire life, a reminder that service, joy, and surrender are inseparable, that pain can be grace in disguise. The 2009 bite sealed a sacred covenant between him and the mystery. Just as before, he walked away humbled but luminous, carrying once again the snake medicine that had marked his path from the beginning, a living symbol of death transmuted into life, fear transformed into faith, and pain reborn as prayer. In July 2010, the Rainbow family gathered in the Allegheny National Forest of Pennsylvania, and once again, Fantuzee found himself among the ever-renewing tribe that had shaped his life for nearly 4 decades. By now, he was both participant and elder, a living bridge between the first circle in Colorado and the new generations who had inherited its dream. The 2010 gathering became one of those shimmering moments where time dissolved, and the energy of the original family flowed through the present like a river rediscovering its source. From the very first night, the camp pulsed with life. Fantuzee described it simply as a joyful explosion of music, laughter, and reunion. Fires crackled across the forest, each one a microcosm of the greater circle. The air was thick with drumming and song, the scents of chai and earth mingling under the wide Pennsylvania sky. For him, these early hours of arrival were always sacred, the threshold between the road and the circle, where strangers once again remembered themselves as kin. The following mornings brought the gentler rhythm of the yoga circles, an increasingly central part of rainbow life in the 2000s. There, among the trees and dew, bodies moved in unison while the forest breathed with them. Fantuzee, ever the joyous servant, joined in, blending laughter and mantra, movement and music. The practice wasn't about discipline or form, it was about presence, the same presence he had touched in the great silences of earlier gatherings. The yoga circle was a living prayer, each stretch and breath an offering to the earth beneath them. Throughout the gathering, he shared what he called the Big Island hip story, a retelling of the rainbow lineage as he had lived it, from Woodstock to the mountains of Colorado, from the butterfly family to the Kumbh Mela. His storytelling was music in another form, part myth, part memory, all heart. Around campfires, younger rainbows would gather close as he spoke, eyes wide, learning not from textbooks or teachers but from lived experience, the oral history of the movement, carried in his laughter and his tears. The 2010 Allegheny gathering was, in many ways, a mirror of his own evolution. It had the wild energy of the early years but also the wisdom of maturity, a balance of ecstatic celebration and grounded spirituality. For Fantuzee, it confirmed something he had long known, that the Rainbow family was not a nostalgia trip, but a living organism, reborn every year through those who showed up in love. As the circle closed and the family dispersed back into the world, the forest fell silent again, but the vibration lingered, the pulse of drums, the breath of yoga, the echo of laughter. For Fantuzee, the 2010 gathering wasn't just another event, it was proof that the seed planted in 1972 was still flowering. The rainbow was alive and thriving, its roots deeper, its branches wider, its song still carrying across the generations, one breath, one story, one circle at a time. In November 2011, Fantuzee carried the rainbow flame to the deserts and hills of Israel, where another gathering of the global family had taken shape. It was the land of prophets, poets, and pilgrims, a place where sacred history and present struggle lived side by side. For Fantuzee, bringing the rainbow vibration there was more than just another circle, it was a pilgrimage of reconciliation, a prayer for unity in a region long defined by separation. From the moment he arrived, he felt the energy of the land, ancient, charged, tender. The gathering unfolded somewhere between olive groves and starlit dunes, where Bedouin winds whispered through the tents and fires. The family came from all over, Israelis, Palestinians, Europeans, Americans, and travelers from India and South America, all answering the same timeless invitation, welcome home. For a few weeks, they built a village of peace, free of borders and politics, living proof that love could cross every line drawn by man. Fantuzee, as ever, was both participant and storyteller. Around the central fire, he began to share what he called his rainbow hip story, the living oral chronicle of the movement, told in rhythm, laughter, and reverence. Night after night, the desert became a classroom without walls. He told the story of Woodstock, where the dream was born, of Colorado in '72, where the family gathered for the first time, of Glastonbury, India, Maui, and the Mela, how each place had added a color to the rainbow's unfolding arc. But in Israel, his words took on new weight. The people listening weren't just seekers. Many were children of conflict, people who had grown up on opposite sides of walls and ideologies. When Fantuzee spoke of unity, it wasn't abstract. It was real, a reminder that the rainbow isn't a religion or a movement, but a practice of peace, a living experiment in coexistence. His stories carried both humor and gravity, like a song that dances and prays at the same time. Around him, the circle glowed, faces illuminated by the fire, hearts opening in recognition. Some cried quietly, others joined in song. And as the night deepened, the words turned to music, and the story became a chant: one earth, one people, one love. In the mornings, the camp returned to simplicity, tea brewing over coals, children laughing, the smell of bread baking in shared ovens. The land itself seemed to soften, as if listening. Fantuzee moved gently through it all, embodying what he had always taught, that peace begins not with politics, but with presence. Every handshake, every shared meal, every song was an act of bridge building. The Israel Rainbow Gathering of 2011 was more than an event. It was a living prayer for healing, for a world that had forgotten its unity. Fantuzee's presence, his stories, and his laughter carried the wisdom of 40 years of circles into a place that needed it most. By the time he left, the desert air was thick with memory, not of history's wounds, but of love's possibility. For him, that gathering confirmed the essence of the rainbow vision, that no matter where the circle forms, whether in the Rockies, the Himalayas, or the Holy Land, it is always the same fire, the same family, the same hope reborn. In 2013, Fantuzee released Ease and Grace, an album that embodied the wisdom and softness of a man who had lived through fire, ecstasy, loss, and rebirth, and had finally come to rest in peace. The title wasn't just poetic, it was a state of being, a culmination of decades spent learning how to move through the world without resistance. Where his earlier records like Open Heart, Peace on Earth, and Tribal Revival radiated the energy of a global troubadour on a mission, Ease and Grace carried the vibration of one who had already arrived. The music reflected that transformation. The wild rhythms and festival anthems that once drove his sound now gave way to gentler melodies, more spacious compositions, and lyrics that spoke of surrender, forgiveness, and balance. It was still unmistakably Fantuzee, joyful, rhythmic, infused with global grooves, but it had matured into something deeper, calmer, and profoundly centered. The songs felt like offerings from a man who had learned the art of letting go, songs that didn't try to inspire dance, but invite stillness within movement. Recorded in a period of reflection after years of travel and service, Ease and Grace distilled the lessons of a lifetime on the road. The near-death experiences, the pilgrimages, the countless rainbow circles and sacred festivals, all of it had taught him the same essential truth, that life flows best when one stops trying to control it. This album was his prayer of acceptance, a hymn to the divine rhythm that carries us when we stop fighting the current. Spiritually, Ease and Grace was the sound of integration. After decades of external pilgrimage, to Woodstock, Glastonbury, India, Maui, Jerusalem, and the far corners of the earth, Fantuzee's journey had turned inward. The fire of youth had become the steady glow of wisdom. His voice, weathered and resonant, carried both the innocence of the seeker and the peace of the sage. The drums and guitars no longer sought to lift him higher, they grounded him in gratitude. Listeners who had followed him since the rainbow dawned could feel the shift. This was not the call to gather, it was the blessing after the gathering, the exhale after the prayer. It was an album made not from the urgency of vision, but from the serenity of fulfillment. The same man who once danced barefoot before thousands in the forest was now sitting quietly by the ocean, singing softly to the waves. In many ways, Ease and Grace was Fantuzee's spiritual autobiography in musical form. It captured what the Rainbow family itself had grown into, no longer a youthful rebellion, but a mature devotion to harmony. The songs became a reminder that the greatest revolution is not found in resistance or speed, but in ease, and that true strength lives in gentleness. Through Ease and Grace, Fantuzee offered the final teaching that decades of music and movement had revealed to him, that love, once awakened, no longer needs to shout. It simply radiates, patient, joyful, effortless, as life itself moving in rhythm with the divine. In 2017, Fantuzee released Fantuzee in Cuba, an album that marked both a return to his Caribbean roots and a new flowering of his global sound. Born in Puerto Rico, he had carried the rhythms of the islands in his blood since childhood, long before Woodstock, Rainbow, or the world tours. With this record, he came full circle, coming home to the Afro-Caribbean pulse that had always been at the heart of his music, while blending it with the universal spirituality that had defined his journey. Cuba, with its ancient drumming traditions and vibrant cultural resilience, was the perfect setting for this rebirth. The island had long been a crossroads of African, Latin, and indigenous soul, a place where music and prayer are indistinguishable. When Fantuzzi arrived there, he found a people who lived what he had been singing about for decades: joy as survival, rhythm as language, community as freedom. He stepped into Havana's courtyards and studios as both student and teacher, carrying his rainbow heart into a culture that already knew how to turn pain into celebration. Fantuzzi in Cuba captured that fusion beautifully. The songs were drenched in sunlight and percussion, congas, cloves, guitars, and voices weaving together in the island's natural cadence. Yet beneath the exuberance ran the deep spiritual current that had always defined his work. The album wasn't just a musical collaboration, it was a cultural communion, a conversation between the sacred fire of rainbow gatherings and the ancestral drum of the Caribbean. Fantuzzi's voice, weathered yet radiant, danced through the grooves with gratitude and wonder. By 2017, he had become a true elder of the global music tribe, a man whose songs had circled the planet and returned home transformed. Fantuzzi in Cuba reflected that maturity with joy rather than solemnity. It was not a retrospective, but a renewal, a reminder that the spirit of unity he'd been carrying since Woodstock was still alive, still evolving, still dancing. He sang of love, resilience, and divine play with the ease of someone who had finally learned that paradise is not a destination but a state of heart. In the broader arc of his life, this album stood as both culmination and continuation. The same rainbow family energy that had once filled mountain meadows now flowed through Havana's streets. The same drum that had called thousands into silence now called them into motion. Fantuzzi in Cuba was a celebration of how far the circle had traveled, how the dream of one earth, one people could find expression even in a place once closed to much of the world. Ultimately, the record wasn't just about Cuba. It was about return to rhythm, to roots, to the joyous surrender of music as prayer. After a lifetime of carrying the rainbow across continents, Fantuzzi had brought it home to the Caribbean sun, closing the loop of his journey with the same elements that had begun it: heart, rhythm, and the unbreakable spirit of love. From these threads, it becomes clear that Fantuzzi's relationship with the rainbow family was never incidental, it was foundational, woven into the very fabric of his life and art. He wasn't a guest in the movement, he was one of its living roots. From the Rainbow Gypsies' journey through Europe to India in the early 1970s, where songs like Universal Lover first echoed through the caravan, to the first gathering in Colorado in 1972, Fantuzzi stood at the crossroads where music, mysticism, and community merged. His story mirrors the rainbow's own evolution, from a spontaneous dream of unity into a global family sustained by song, service, and spirit. For over 50 years, he remained a heartbeat in that circle, singing the same truth across continents, that love is the law, and the circle, once begun, never ends.